What if behind the polite drawing rooms of antebellum Southern mansions, the candlelit corridors of political power, and the fiery rhetoric defending states' rights lay a secret conspiracy with grand imperial ambitions? A plan to carve a vast empire across the Americas where slavery would not just survive but flourish. The debates over slavery, states' rights, and westward expansion had grown more heated year by year. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, the violence in Bleeding Kansas, the Dred Scott decision all had convinced many Southerners that the federal government could not be trusted to protect their interests. This is the story of the Knights of the Golden Circle, a name that evokes both real history and almost mythic intrigue. It's a story of wealthy Southern planters who refused to accept the possibility of abolition, who saw the rising anti-slavery sentiment of the North as an existential threat to their entire way of life. And it's the story of how they tried to fight that threat not only on the battlefield, a civilizing mission, they would have called it, a way to maintain white supremacy and economic dominance in the face of growing Northern opposition. These castles operated like secret lodges, with officers, hierarchies, and strict rules. Initiates took solemn oaths of loyalty. Meetings were conducted in secrecy, often by candlelight in back rooms of taverns or private homes. But in the shadows, through secret societies, coded oaths, clandestine recruitment, and whispered plans for conquest and assassination. The KGC wasn't a debating society or a gentleman's club for Southern hotheads to sip brandy and complain about abolitionists. It was an organization with structure, secrecy, and purpose. The Knights of the Golden Circle, often abbreviated as KGC, emerged in the late 1850s, at a moment when America was fracturing along sectional lines. But for some, defending the status quo was not enough. They wanted to expand it. Once accepted, they were taught secret signs, handshakes, and passwords to identify one another. They used coded correspondence and even ciphers to keep their communications hidden from prying eyes, thus restoring the balance of power in Congress that Northern free states threatened to destroy. By 1860, with Abraham Lincoln's election signaling the triumph of the anti-slavery Republican Party, secession became a reality. The Caribbean islands like Cuba, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. Even before secession, this was illegal under U.S. law. They raised money for the Confederate government. They helped move weapons and supplies across Union lines. They recruited men in the North to fight for the South, or at least sabotage Union efforts. Instead of focusing solely on foreign conquest, they threw their weight behind the Confederate cause. Filibustering private military expeditions against foreign countries was banned by the Neutrality Act. Anyone caught organizing such plots risked prison or worse. A victorious South could then conquer Mexico and the Caribbean, but first, the Union had to be defeated. They would vow to support the expansion of slavery and to aid fellow members whenever called upon. Even when authorities knew they existed, they often couldn't prove exactly what they were doing. Even parts of northern South America, in Indiana, authorities cracked down hard on suspected KGC cells, uncovering stockpiles of weapons and coded documents. Defeated but unbroken, they were said to be biding their time, preserving their gold, and waiting for the right moment to strike. They raised money to outfit ships, buy weapons, and hire mercenaries. Some members even traveled to Mexico and Central America to scout opportunities. The Knights of the Golden Circle dreamed of building an empire. This war chest was intended to fund guerrilla warfare, a second rebellion, or a renewed conquest of Latin America. They worked to undermine the Union war effort however they could. Only a select few high-ranking KGC members knew how to read them. Some accounts claim the knowledge was passed down through generations, father to son, in strict secrecy. They were placed in caves, beneath old oak trees, inside abandoned mines, or in remote wilderness. Why not create a new confederacy of slave-holding states stretching thousands of miles in every direction? They held up banks, trains, and stagecoaches, often in states where Union sentiment was strong. He and his brother Frank joined bands of bushwhackers who waged brutal, irregular warfare, ambushing Union soldiers and massacring civilian supporters of the Union. They didn't spend their loot on luxuries, but buried it in carefully chosen locations, marked on coded maps meant only for fellow KGC operatives. Their golden circle was not just a poetic flourish, it was a map. A vision of a vast slave-holding realm that would ring the Gulf of Mexico. They've deciphered strange symbols carved into rock circles, arrows, Masonic-like signs they insist are KGC codes. The 1850s were filled with American adventurers called filibusters who tried to conquer parts of Latin America. Gold coins dating from the Civil War, rusted chests buried beneath ancient trees. Men like William Walker seized control of Nicaragua for a time, declaring himself president and re-legalizing slavery there. It would include the entire American South, of course, but also Mexico, all of Central America. Their logic was simple and chilling. If slavery was threatened in the United States, why not export it? For them, this was not seen as immoral but as destiny. He had a small circle of co-conspirators who helped plan the murder and other attacks. This wasn't just idle talk. Booth was a well-known actor, but also an outspoken Confederate sympathizer who saw Lincoln as a tyrant destroying the South. They organized themselves into local cells they called castles. Prospective members were screened carefully. They needed to be wealthy, well-connected, or otherwise useful to the cause. That he was following orders from a secret council that remained hidden even after the war ended. Some accounts suggest they even had elaborate initiation rituals. Candidates would swear to protect the order's secrets under penalty of death. Most believe Booth acted on his own initiative with a small circle of friends. Why so much secrecy? Because their plans were nothing less than treason. They were plotting to overthrow foreign governments, invade other nations, and create an empire built on human bondage, but they were undeterred. If they could collect millions in gold to fund a second war, why wouldn't they also plan the ultimate act of political terrorism? In the years before the Civil War, the KGC actively recruited adventurers willing to join these expeditions. This wasn't entirely new. The KGC saw these efforts not as rogue adventures, but as prototypes for their grand plan. They believed that by creating new slave-holding states in Latin America, they could force the U.S. government to admit them to the Union as new slave states. But as tensions escalated in the U.S., the KGC's attention turned inward. As Southern states began to secede in 1860 and 1861, the KGC adapted. They saw the Confederacy as the first step in their plan. During the Civil War, KGC members acted as spies, smugglers, and recruiters. Northern authorities were well aware of the threat. Newspapers warned of vast KGC conspiracies, claiming they had infiltrated state governments in places like Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky. Some of these claims were surely exaggerated propaganda designed to stir Northern outrage and justify harsh crackdowns on dissenters. But there was truth in them. The KGC did exist in Northern states. They did have cells castles where Southern sympathizers met in secret. They plotted sabotage. They spread pro-Confederate propaganda. Union generals and governors took the threat seriously. Some KGC members were arrested, tried, and imprisoned for conspiracy or treason. But despite these efforts, the KGC remained a shadowy presence, difficult to eradicate completely. Their secrecy was their greatest weapon. This cloak of secrecy also allowed their legend to grow. After the war, rumors swirled that the KGC hadn't dissolved but gone deeper underground. One of the most enduring parts of the KGC legend is its supposed treasure. According to countless stories, as the Confederacy neared defeat, the Knights of the Golden Circle collected enormous sums of gold and silver, millions of dollars worth. Rather than let this treasure fall into Union hands, they buried it. These caches were allegedly hidden all across the South and West, in Missouri, Texas, Oklahoma, even California. Maps were created, maps that were coded or written in ciphers. These men were said to have sworn blood oaths to protect the treasure's location, even if it meant killing intruders. Jesse James, the notorious outlaw, is at the center of this treasure legend. During the Civil War, Jesse fought as a Confederate guerrilla in Missouri. After the war, to many, Jesse was a bandit. To others, he was a folk hero, a rebel who refused to submit to Union authority. But in the KGC legend, Jesse James wasn't robbing for himself. He was a soldier on a mission. According to these stories, Jesse James and his gang were collecting gold and silver to replenish the KGC's hidden war chest. Jesse James, in this version, was less an outlaw than a secret agent of a defeated nation, working to keep alive the dream of a Confederate resurgence. There are countless tales of these hidden caches. Treasure hunters have spent over a century looking for them. They've dug up caves in the Ozarks. They've scoured remote Texas ranches. Every few years, someone claims to have found part of the treasure, but hard evidence is scarce. For every story of a lucky find, there are dozens of dead ends, false leads, and elaborate hoaxes. Yet the legend persists, and then there is the darkest rumor of all, that the KGC was behind the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. When John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln at Ford's Theater in April 1865, the nation was shocked. Booth didn't act entirely alone. But was there more to it? Some claim Booth was a member of the KGC, that the assassination was not just the act of a fanatic, but a planned, organized conspiracy. According to these theories, the KGC saw Lincoln as the ultimate threat to their vision of the South. Killing him was not revenge, but strategy. The plan was to throw the Union into chaos. With Lincoln dead, perhaps the Confederacy could regroup. Perhaps Southern guerrillas could continue the fight. Rumors spread that Booth carried coded letters tied to the KGC, that he used KGC safe houses during his escape, but historians remain skeptical. While Booth's hatred of Lincoln is well documented, and while he certainly had Confederate sympathies, there is no conclusive evidence linking him to the KGC. Yet the possibility of a hidden hand behind Lincoln's death remains irresistible. It taps into our fascination with secret societies and hidden plots. Because if the KGC could plan invasions of Mexico, if they could organize sabotage in the North, the rumors about the KGC's involvement in Lincoln's assassination were just the beginning of the legends that would swirl for decades. Even as the Confederacy died and the Southern cause was militarily defeated, the Knights of the Golden Circle did not simply vanish from the American imagination. Instead, they seemed to melt into the shadows. Defeated but not destroyed, broken but unbowed. According to countless stories that spread in the post-war years, the KGC didn't disband, it went underground. The idea was that while the Confederate armies surrendered, the KGC went silent, preserving their secrecy, hiding their treasures, and waiting for a future generation to finish the fight, which rose in the late 1860s with a mission to terrorize newly freed black citizens and re-establish white supremacy in the post-war South. Some tales claimed the KGC simply rebranded itself under other names, that its members helped form or at least heavily influenced the founding of the Ku Klux Klan. Both were rooted in a fanatical belief in white supremacy and a willingness to use violence to achieve their ends. Both saw themselves as defending the Southern way of life from the perceived tyranny of Northern power and racial equality. It is not hard to see the connection. The Klan, like the KGC, was organized in secret cells with elaborate rituals, coded symbols, and hierarchical leadership. Though historians debate the direct connections between the KGC and the early Klan, the similarities in their methods and ideology are undeniable. These were not small stashes of personal savings, but organized, military-scale treasure depots designed to fund a future insurrection. But the KGC's post-war legend isn't only one of racism and terror, it is also one of buried treasure and secret maps. Clues were supposedly carved into rocks or trees in remote areas, known only to trusted KGC members sworn to secrecy. For die-hard secessionists, it wasn't just a military defeat, it was the end of their entire worldview. If anything, the fall of the Confederacy only supercharged these stories. Imagine the scene in 1865, Confederate generals surrendering, Union troops occupying southern cities, plantations burning, fortunes evaporating overnight. In such chaos, it's not hard to believe that some would hide their wealth rather than see it confiscated. And so the story grew that the KGC, anticipating defeat, created an enormous network of buried caches. The maps to these caches were said to be written in elaborate ciphers. Family lore in many southern states is filled with old stories of grandfathers or great-uncles who were in the KGC and took secret knowledge of these treasures to their graves. In some versions, Jesse didn't even die as history records in 1882 but faked his death to continue guarding the treasure or pass on the secrets to trusted heirs. Generation after generation, these tales fueled treasure hunts. Men wandered the backwoods with shovels and lanterns, poring over cryptic maps, deciphering strange symbols cut into limestone, convinced that the next turn in the cave would reveal stacked gold coins stamped with the faces of long-dead presidents. Jesse James is at the center of many of these stories for good reason. The James Gang's robberies were famous even in their own time, but what made them legendary was the belief that they were more than common bandits. That someday, with enough gold and enough guns, the lost cause could be reborn. Instead of spending their loot on personal extravagance, they were said to be loyal Confederates, knights themselves hiding treasure in secret KGC vaults, waiting for the South to rise again. Over time, the legend of Jesse James and the KGC treasure took on a life of its own. Some claimed he left behind coded maps or cryptic clues in his letters, which today's treasure hunters pore over like sacred texts. The romance of these tales is irresistible. They have all the elements of classic treasure stories: secret societies, daring outlaws, hidden vaults, coded maps, buried chests of gold. They also have the added drama of real historical trauma. The Civil War devastated the South. The old planter aristocracy was ruined. Slavery was abolished. Many Southerners felt not just defeated, but humiliated. It's easy to see why the idea of hidden war chests preserved for a future day of reckoning would be so powerful. The coins were real, valuable, and dated from the Civil War era. It offered hope that the Confederacy wasn't truly dead, just dormant. Of course, there's no solid evidence these vast KGC hoards ever existed. Historians generally see them as legend, fueled by post-war Southern nostalgia and the natural human love of mystery and adventure. That hasn't stopped generations of treasure hunters from searching. Throughout the 20th century, newspaper stories breathlessly reported on supposed finds, mysterious tunnels, cryptic symbols, half-buried iron chests. Amateur codebreakers publish theories about carved stones in Texas or Missouri, claiming they've cracked the night ciphers at last. Sometimes people did find old coins, rusted weapons, or faded Confederate bills. But never the fabled millions that were supposed to restart the war. In 2014, one discovery reignited the legend. A man in California found a buried cache of 19th century gold coins on his property. Immediately, speculation ran wild. Was this KGC gold? Had one of the lost war chests been found? Experts examined the coins carefully, but found no direct link to the KGC. More likely, they were simply a personal hoard, buried by someone in the 19th century for safekeeping and forgotten. But the dream persisted. Even today, YouTube channels, podcasts, and blogs debate the KGC's treasure maps. Metal detectorists comb rural land, convinced that just under the next layer of soil lies a fortune in Confederate gold. Meanwhile, other researchers argue that even if the KGC did hide gold, it's almost certainly long gone looted, moved, or spent by the handful of people who knew the locations. Or simply lost forever as the last keepers of the secret died without passing it on. But the KGC legend isn't only about gold. It's also about power exercised in the shadows. The very idea of the KGC plays on a deep human fascination with secret societies. Think about it. An elite club of powerful men meeting in hidden rooms, swearing oaths in candlelight, plotting the destiny of nations. They weren't alone in history. Freemasons, the Bavarian Illuminati, Skull and Bones, these groups, real and exaggerated, all captured the public imagination with their promise of hidden knowledge and behind-the-scenes influence. For the KGC, the promise was darker, a hidden hand ensuring the survival of slavery, even if it meant war, assassination, or the conquest of foreign lands. And that's another part of the story that is often sanitized or glossed over. The Knights of the Golden Circle weren't just a colorful band of treasure-hiding adventurers. Their core mission was the preservation and expansion of human slavery. Their dream of empire was explicitly a plan to create new slave-holding states in Latin America and the Caribbean. They hoped to dominate millions of black and indigenous people through violence, coercion, and bondage. They saw the abolitionist movement not as a moral crusade, but as an existential threat to their wealth and status. Their plan was, in effect, to create an entire civilization built on forced labor and white supremacy, safe from northern interference. When we talk about the KGC today, it's important not to romanticize them as mere rebels or adventurers. They were conspirators for a brutal, racist system that rightly died in war. And yet their story remains historically important because it shows just how far some were willing to go to preserve that system. They weren't content to fight politically in Congress or even to secede and form the Confederacy. They plotted the violent overthrow of other nations, hoping to remake entire continents in their image. Their secrecy, their coded rituals, their hidden plans, these weren't just dramatic flourishes. They were necessary for a movement that knew it was planning something both illegal and deeply immoral. After the Civil War, the South faced defeat, Reconstruction, and decades of poverty. But the mythology of the lost cause blossomed. Southern writers and politicians rewrote history, depicting the Confederacy as a noble, doomed effort fighting not for slavery, but for states' rights and honor. In this climate, the KGC legend thrived. Stories of hidden treasure weren't just about gold, they were about hope. Hope that one day the South could reclaim its lost power. Hope that the old social order could be restored. These stories were told and retold at family gatherings, in fading plantation houses, in rural communities that felt forgotten and humiliated by defeat. They became part of the cultural fabric of Southern folklore that still lingers. Even today, the idea of the KGC is invoked by some extremist groups who see themselves as the heirs to a tradition of defiant Southern resistance. They may not claim to be hunting for buried gold, but they trade in the same ideas of secret organization, coded language, and a commitment to resisting the federal government. This persistence shows that while the KGC itself may be long dead, the impulses that created it remain. The belief in conspiracies, in hidden power, in the righteousness of violence in defense of a way of life, these are not relics of the 19th century. But how such a system endured so long and left scars that still mark the nation today. They are recurring features of American history, and that is why the story of the Knights of the Golden Circle matters. It's not just a colorful legend about lost treasure and shadowy plots. It is a window into America's original sin, slavery, and the lengths to which some were willing to go to preserve it. It is also a warning about how secrecy, Ideology and violence can combine into something enduringly dangerous. Because even after the Confederacy's military defeat, the ideas the KGC fought for did not die. They transformed. They hid. They resurfaced in new forms: Jim Crow laws, lynching, segregation, white supremacist organizations, and even modern-day hate groups. In remembering the Knights of the Golden Circle, we remember a specific conspiracy. But we also remember the broader conspiracy that was slavery itself, a system built on lies, enforced by violence, maintained through fear, and justified with warped ideology. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, not the question of where the gold is buried. It's easy to get lost in the romance of treasure maps and outlaw legends. But the real legacy of the KGC is darker, more sobering, and far more important. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the past and about ourselves. And until every trace of those old dreams of domination is gone, their story is one that still matters. It is, in the end, not just a mystery to be solved, but a lesson to be remembered.